Okay guys, so I'm doing this for the algebra kids from 3.6 to 3.10. It should look like this. Guided quadratic functions. Sorry, it's not focusing. Okay, guided quadratic functions 10.1, independent quadratic functions 10.1, and then 2 for 10.2. Okay, so we're going to start with 10.1. You're really just identifying things on your quadratic graph. So I wrote this here because this is the parent function of all quadratics. So anytime you have an equation that has an x squared in it, that means that this is a quadratic. It's going to look like a U shape. Now that U shape could be up or it could be open downward. Okay, but there's still specific elements of these graphs that we need to know. Okay, so for number 1, A says, what's the vertex? So they already have it labeled here for you. The vertex is this point right here. So we just need to find that coordinate. So from the origin, I go over 3, then I go down -3. So my point would be 3, sorry, so it'd be 3, -3. Oh. 3, -3. Okay. Okay, and then for B, it says maximum point or minimum point. Alright, so the max and the min is still the vertex. So the vertex is at a low point, it's the lowest point of the graph, so that's going to be a minimum. So I'm going to put here min. Okay, because the vertex is at a low point, so that's a minimum. So on your B, you're going to put minimum. I know it's hard to see. I'm going to try to darken it. Let me try to get a different one. Not sure that helped. I think it helped a little bit. Okay, and so it says opens upward or downward. If you look at it, it's opening upward. Okay, so this is going to be upward. And then you have axis of symmetry. Okay, so I put a line here down through the vertex. You might want to write this on your graph. Put a line down through the vertex. This is a line, or the axis of symmetry. It's the line that divides the graph into two equal sections. So they're like mirror images of each other. That line that divides those two equal pieces is called the axis of symmetry, and you're going to have to describe it as an equation. So the equation of a vertical line, you should know, is always x equals some number. So wherever that line crosses the x-axis, that's the number it's going to be equal to. So this equation for this line is going to be x equals 3. Because that's where it crosses the x-axis. So axis of symmetry is going to be x equals 3. And then it says number of roots. How many roots do I have? Okay, you don't have that labeled on your graph, and there's a reason for that. There's different ways that you can say roots. You can say x-intercepts, you can say solutions, you can say zeros. So if you want to write this down, that might be helpful for you. So anytime they ask you for an x-intercept, know that it's this point where it crosses the x-axis. If they ask you for a root, it's also this point. If they ask you for a solution, also this point. Ask you for a zero, it's also this point. And this point. Anywhere it crosses the x-axis. So this one has 2 roots. It crosses the x-axis at 2 points. These are 2 roots, 2 solutions, 2 zeros. So number of roots is 2. If you want to see what it would look like if it was one solution, if your u is just barely touching on the x-axis, that would be one solution. It only touches at one point. But ours does dip down below the x-axis, so that makes us have 2 solutions, or 2 roots. If any roots, what are they? So we're just going to come up with the coordinates for these 2 places that it crosses. So So this one would be 1, 0. And this one over here would be 5, 0. I know that's hard to see. So over here on the if any roots, what are they? I'm going to put 1, 0 and 5, 0. Okay, so this is how you're going to fill out number 2. Alright, so really quick, I'm just going to try to go through as many examples as I can. So we're going to go to number 3. The only difference between 3 and 2 is that you're going to have to graph this in the graphing calculator first, and then sketch the graph, and then identify all the things that we just talked about. So I'm going to bring up my calculator. Okay, so this is my calculator. I'm going to put in x squared plus 6x plus 5. So I first go to y equals. So on your calculator, you're going to go to y equals. You turn it on. So I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to put in x squared. The x is above this blue button called apps. You see xt and then a sort of O-shaped thing and then an n. This is where you're going to get your x from. So that's going to be x. I'm going to use this x squared here for my squared. I'm going to put plus 6x and then plus 5. Okay, and then I would graph that. Okay, so I zoomed in a little bit, but what you really want to do is you're going to go to second calc. So this is second and then calc. So second is the yellow button, and then calc is the one that says C-A-L-C in yellow. It's above trace. So you are going to push on trace. So second trace. And you want to go to 2 for your 0. So we want to find out what our 0 is. So I'm going to go to 2. I'm going to hit, well, you should have a cursor up here. And it wants you to give a left bound for your point and a right bound. So if I want to find this point right here, it wants me to choose somewhere on one side of it and then choose some point on the other side of it, so then it can have kind of somewhere to calculate what would be in the middle of those two. So left bound is just, I'm just going to move my cursor a little bit to the left of the point that I want. I'm going to hit enter. And then it says right bound. So I'm going to move my cursor to the right past that point that I want. And then I'm going to hit enter again. And then it says guess. So I just kind of move it back onto the line a little bit. And I hit enter. And my 0 for this one is going to be -5, 0. So I know that's one of my points. So I'm going to put here -5, 0. So that's this one right here. And I'm going to get my other point. So for my other point, I'm going to go back to second trace, just like I did before. Go to 0, which is 2. And it's going to ask me for a left bound again. So I'm going to want to, since I want this point, I'm going to put my cursor to the left of that point, and then I'll hit enter. So this is a little bit to the left of this point that I want right here. So I'm going to hit enter. Then it says right bound, so I'm going to move to the right of the point that I want, which is over here somewhere. I'll hit enter again, and then move it on to the line a little bit. Then I hit enter again. Okay, so my other 0 is -1, 0. So that would be right here. So I already had that done, but this would be right here, -1, 0. So for you to get your y-intercept, we can go back to second calc or second trace. So second trace, and I'm going to go to value, which is 1. So I'll hit 1, hit enter. Well, no, I don't need to hit enter. Okay, so it says x equals, and then it wants you to give you the value of x, and then it'll show you what the value of y is. So my y-intercept is always where x is 0, right? Because if it's on the y-axis, x is going to be 0. So I'm going to put in x equals 0. Hit enter. Okay, so it gave me my y-intercept. Where x is 0, y is 5. So that's my y-intercept. So that's another point I can put, which I already had because I had messed up and I redid it. So that's our y-intercept. We got our 2 x-intercepts. So now we can kind of graph this or sketch this graph. So since this is a symmetrical, since quadratics are symmetrical, I'm just going to pick halfway between these 2 points would be right here. So if this point is 1 over from this point, there's going to be a similar point on this side. So this would be over 1. I can go up 1. So I know that there's going to be a point probably here. Oh, we still need to do our vertex though. Okay, so we got our roots. I got our y-intercept. Using our y-intercept, we kind of guesstimated another point that would be on this side. We still need our vertex. That's a critical point that we need to sketch this graph. So to get our vertex, we're going to go to second, trace again, and then we're going to go down to 3 for a minimum, because you can tell from the paper that this is going to open upward, so minimum down here. So 3 is what we want. I'll hit enter. And then it's asking me for a left bound point. So if the vertex is that lowest point, this is already to the left. So I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to go to the right of that point that I want, which is the vertex, and I'll hit enter again. And then I'll guess. So I'll just come closer to where that point would be right there. I'll hit enter. And then it gives it to me. So the minimum is x equals -3, -4. So on here I'd go -1, 2, 3, then 1, 2, 3, 4. So right here. So we got our vertex, we got our 2 roots, and we got our y-intercept. So now we can kind of sketch that graph. So then I would go ahead and fill in all this stuff. So my vertex, we just figured that out. So that's going to be -3, -4. It's a minimum. It opens upward. As you can see, right? It opens upward. And axis of symmetry. Okay, axis of symmetry, remember, is that line that breaks the quadratic into 2 equal pieces. So it's going to be right here. Or 2 mirror images, I should say. So that's going to be this line right here. And remember, it's a vertical line, so it's going to be x equals a number. And that number is always going to be where it crosses the x-axis. So if this is 0, this would be -3. So it's x equals -3. I have 2 roots. That's the next question, number of roots. I have 2 places where it crosses the x-axis. So that's going to be 2. Try to get to focus. Okay. So it's going to be 2 roots. If any roots, what are they? Okay, so this one would be -1, 0. And the other one was -5. So down here I'm going to put -5, 0. These 2 coordinates right here. So one was -1, 0, the other one was -5, 0. Okay, so I showed you how to do that on your calculator, sketching, and then doing the elements of the quadratic. So you'll do 4 on your own, and then let's see what we can do with number 5. So number 5 says find the solutions or roots of the quadratic equation y equals x squared plus x minus 20 by factoring. Also use the table of values or graphing calculator to graph the quadratic function. After graphing the quadratic function on the graph below, determine the following. Okay, so let's first factor this. So it says y equals x squared plus x minus 20. So I'm going to use my little t-chart here because this doesn't have any number in front of it other than 1. So I can use my little t-chart using c right here. I'll put -20. And then this would be my b value, which is +1. So I'm going to find factors of -20 that add up to 1. Okay, so I've got, what, 4 and 5? So I could have -4, +5. And that's going to be it, right? -5 or -4 plus 5 is going to be 1. So this is the pair that I want. negative 5